I still can't get over the fact how the company which makes Scrabble, that's a game for children, has decided to change the rules in order to make it more accessible. And in order to do so, they have dumbed down the game. They're basically saying that, well, you can play now without keeping score so that it's more inclusive for the next generation. And as I pointed out in the previous video, when I spoke about this subject at length, I said that this is incredibly insulting. However, the mainstream media is praising this. They're treating it as if it's a historical event, as if a new play, the likes of Shakespeare or the Iliad, has been written in the United States of America. And they're treating this with such fervor and celebration that even the press from Romania is reporting on this. And it's not just Scrabble, but now apparently we have female space marines, and this is also treated as if it's some breaking cultural event, as if it's the modern version of the Sistine Chapel. So on one hand, everyone is looking with awe and admiration at this accomplishment, and there's also another aspect of this, the fact that there was pressure on this company for years now in order to get on board with the program. It's almost like this was the last pagan company in society, and after much pressure, not only did they finally convert to Christianity and are like normal people, but they also produced the great work, which is like the Sistine Chapel. So everyone is talking about this, and everyone is admiring this, and apparently in 2024, this is the type of cultural hallmarks that our generation is producing. It's almost as if it's expected that our kids 20 years from now are going to look back at this with a tear in their eye and admire our works the same way we admire the Eiffel Tower or the Notre Dame. And the question is why, though? Why is there such interest being put on this? And why does it seem as if it's not grassroots? Why does it seem that it's being inflicted upon society the same way that in a medieval society, the institution of the church would inflict its dogma upon the peasantry, and they would say, no, this is the correct way of thinking, and if you think differently, you're going to be excommunicated. You're going to be pushed away from the rest of society. And to answer this, I think you need to look at the cultural gap between the two generations, between how people used to think in the 90s, in the early 2000s, and even in 2010. The morality that we had, and it's the morality that we inherited from our parents, and it was a morality of action. In order to be a good person, you had to do good things. So, for instance, if you woke up one morning and you went outside and your entire yard was covered in snow, and you decided not to clean only the snow from your place, but also the one from your neighbor, that was actually considered a good action, a good gesture, and it would raise the standard of you in front of your neighbors. And similarly, in exchange, your neighbors would also do kind acts, sometimes that would benefit you, and that would create a healthy environment. That would create a nice place in which you were to raise your kids in a neighborhood that's safe, and you could rely on each other. However, that is not the view that is being promoted now. The new view that is coming from the academia, so it's not that people's parents were pushing this, it's what the academia is pushing, and it's also through various corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard and activist groups. They're pushing for a different type of morality. And this type of morality is colloquially defined as woke. It's a morality that is obsessed with creating equality, or more likely equity, in a society. It is not interested in the individual. It is not interested in the actions of the individual. Instead, the woke ideology believes in the structural structures of systemic systems. You see, in the view of the academia, they believe that they can create the perfect utopia. And this new system is akin to that of the bosom of a mother. As long as you are allowed to stay there, as long as you belong to the system, then the system will take care of you, will provide you with happiness, will provide you with joy, and you are able to live a fulfilling life as an individual. However, the opposite to this is the exclusion from the system. And this is how woke ideologues justify any type of crime. Whether we're talking about a burglar, a mugger, a looter, or even a rapist, the progressive ideologue will explain the actions of the criminal not as that of an individual that chose to hurt others, but instead as an individual that has been excluded from the system. And by being excluded from the system, he was denied access to the bosom, which would have given him the resources and the happiness required for him not to commit a life of crime. As such, you can see why inclusivity is such an important pillar stone in the mind of the progressive. For them, everything has to be inclusive. There should be no female spaces. There should be no games that exclude anyone based on their capability to play. Everyone should get a trophy. Everyone should get the gold medal. We shouldn't keep score between winners or losers. And by doing this, by everyone participating into this, we can create the perfect society. And every single time someone decides not to play along, every single time someone decides to be exclusionary, even in something as silly as a children game, he normalizes the concept of exclusion, and as such, they are an evil person. Alternatively, someone that chooses to push for inclusivity, even in something as mundane as a children's game, they are being celebrated. And when you require an ideology that every single person in society, every single member adheres to, and you have a strong thought policing in order to enforce it, you can realize the actual hellscape that the progressives are trying to create. There can be no dissent, there can be no people that disagree, there can only be the bosom. And there can only be inclusivity. And now that you understand how their new morality functions, a lot of the things that were previously considered to be bewildering and clownish suddenly make sense. For instance, a couple of years ago, a journalist was absolutely livid that her neighbor decided to remove the snow from her yard. And the reason for this is that she understood that what the neighbor did was a nice act according to the previous morality. She was also very happy that she doesn't have to remove the snow herself, but she knows that the neighbor doesn't believe in inclusivity. She knows that the neighbor was a right-winger, and as such, it is an immoral person. So him doing the act of removing the snow must be subversive. He is just trying to change her mind, to stray her away from the golden path of mankind in making her believe that actually there can be good people that do not adhere to the ideology. And she had to write an article explaining how she remains strong in her faith and she still thinks that her neighbor is a piece of shit, despite the fact that he did a kind action towards her. Alternatively, the same type of morality can be used to excuse the absolute abhorrent and criminal actions of certain individuals. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, Anna Kasparian made a video in which she described a case that she barely could believe on how a criminal not only murdered someone, but then decided to butcher the corpse and hide the body parts. When the police eventually arrived, they found the apartment covered in so much blood that they considered it's now a health hazard and no one can live there. So obviously they take the person into custody and they take him to the section, but the person is soon released without bail. So a dangerous criminal, a clear hazard to society, has now been placed back on the streets, much to the dismay and horror of Anna Kasparian, which said rightfully so that if this is what it means to be a leftist, if I have to support this, then I won't. And Cenk Uygur said, no, obviously it doesn't mean that. No one is going to contradict you. But people did contradict her. There were many podcasts that were made condemning Anna's thinking and saying that no, you don't understand that the criminals are actually victims of society because they have been excluded from the bosom. Because we did not allow it, we weren't inclusive enough to these criminals, we didn't invite them in our homes and treat them the exact same way as our family, society has failed them. And if we only would have offered more kindness and compassion and understanding, none of this would have happened. And I would like you to notice how the ideology is absolute. There can be no exception to this. There can be no criminal that does something because they are mentally ill or does something because they're psychopathic. No, it's always because the criminal was excluded. And they will apply this standard to hashtag all. The only crime in a woke ideology is that of exclusion. People who are exclusive are the only criminals and the only immoral people in this society. Meanwhile, others who commit actual acts of crime are actual good people that just had a rough upbringing. Let me know what you guys think, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.